everyone. Welcome back to Childless Not by Choice, where my mission is to recognize and speak to the broken hearts of childless not by choice women and men around the world. Civilla Morgan here. I am spreading the great news that we can live a joyful, relevant, and fulfilled life, although we did not have the children we so wanted. Well, as we continue on here with our newest episode, I would like to thank my Patreon contributors. Patreon contributors are those who have taken an interest in my platform, whether they fit the childless not by choice demographic or not. They have decided to contribute a certain dollar amount on a regular basis to help fund my dream of creating awareness and conversation for the childless not by choice community globally. Be sure to click the Patreon link for details and to become a patron. And I now have two patrons, so thankful. A longtime patron, Jordan Morgan, and now we have our newer patron, Ivy Calhoun. Thank you to Jordan and Ivy for your patronage. It is truly appreciated. And I have a third spot here waiting just for you. So if you'd like to become a patron, if you like what this podcast is all about and the awareness that we're creating, head on over to patreon.com/childless not by choice. If you have any questions about that, including how the money is used, etc., please feel free to let me know. Well, we have a guest today, and she has been very patient because we've had tech issues, issues connecting, and we finally made it. So, Chiara Berardelli is an Italian-Scottish singer-songwriter living in Glasgow, Scotland. She grew up playing classical piano, but spent most of her time playing along to any songs that made it over the airwaves to the Highlands of Scotland. Chiara left her job as a doctor, a general practitioner, to follow her passion and studied music and songwriting in London and Bath. A lover of words, chords, and honesty, she writes confessional pop songs about life and how it affects her. In 2010, she recorded her debut album, Don't Be So Lovely, with Mark Freegard at Coyote Studio, Glasgow, and self-released a further EP, My Big Mouth, in 2014. Her new album, Seamonster, of which we will be talking today, released on March 2nd, 2018, is her most personal project to date, inspired by the loss of her dream of becoming a mother. The songs depict a journey from the crashing realization that something so longed for is permanently out of reach in the title track to the tentative beginnings of finding joy again in the song Somewhere New. Deep Space Hibernation, the lead single from the album, was chosen by Radio Scotland's Janice Forsyth as her single of the week on the afternoon show, and has also won an International Songwriting Award. Chiara will be launching, she's launched her album in Scotland. She launched it in March. We'll talk about that as well. And she has a couple of gigs scheduled for autumn, so we'll be talking about that as well. So, Chiara, thank you so much for your patience with us getting this episode together, this interview. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Yes.
Finally, we get to talk.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We even had tech issues today, guys. Even today, we were having tech issues, and she hung out with me, and I'm so thankful for that. So, let's get right to it. Since we started a little late because of these tech issues. I really, really like the Another Planet track. Can you tell us the backstory on that track?
Sure. When I was 44, I met somebody. I met someone who had two children, and I think I was probably single for about 8 years, give or take a few months here and there prior to that, and thought that I'd kind of dealt with, I suppose, the fact that I looked like I wasn't going to have children. Somehow I think I just kind of pushed it down, really, my feelings about it. And when I met this person when I was 44, kind of all seemed to, I think it was being with him and with his children kind of brought it all to the surface, and the longing and the desire. And for quite a long time, I felt I didn't really know what. I felt sad. I was upset all the time. I didn't really know why. And, you know, as I kind of tried to find out more about what I was feeling, and I started to realize that I was grieving for the family that I didn't have. But things were difficult with us because I spent a lot of time stuck in the past, in the sense that I was wishing that we'd met earlier and had children together. And I didn't seem to be able to move beyond that repeated thing. Mm-hmm. And he found it, as you can imagine, all a bit of a struggle. He wasn't the most empathic of people, but even without that, I think it was probably pretty hard. And after we split up, I kind of tried to explain to him what it was all about, and I don't think he just never really understood it. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, I kind of wanted to write a song to him that kind of put it into words, and took me quite a long time to get it exactly right, because what I wanted to say was, you wanted me to be, he just wanted me to be fine so that we could have some fun, and he'd had a difficult divorce, and he didn't really want somebody who was in tears all the time, fair enough. But what I tried to explain to him was that I couldn't just snap my fingers and be okay, and if that was something that I felt I could do, didn't he think that I would do it? So that was the essence of the song, and just trying to sort of explain that to him. So I wrote the song, and I got it exactly the way I wanted to say it, and felt, not that he's ever heard the song as far as I know, although he might have listened, obviously, but I don't know if he would ever. It's quite funny because I did a gig once where I kind of went into a little bit of detail as to who the song was directed at, and it turned out that there was a guy in the audience who was not necessarily a friend of his, but a friend of one of his friends, which is quite funny.
So things can have a way of getting back.
Yeah. So afterwards, he introduced himself, and I said, "Oh, so how did you hear about my music?" And he said, "Well, actually, I'm a friend of da da da." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Uh-oh.
That's okay. I don't think I said anything too bad. So, yeah.
Well, so that's okay. Well, it's the truth, and hey, the truth helps as you're healing, so it is what it is.
Yeah. And actually, in some ways, I would think that the feeling of, I think it's a feeling a lot of people who've gone through this can identify with, from what people say, that you start to explain how you feel, and people just look at you literally like you're from another planet. Mm-hmm. And, I would say that I've had that experience with some of my friends as well, and just people that just don't.
You don't get it.
Don't get it, So, yeah. It's not an unusual thing to feel.
Yeah, it's 2018, but it's still not a conversation that can easily be had.
No, it's true.
But, moving on, tell us about the album as a whole, Seamonster. How did you come up with the name Seamonster?
We, when the feelings of, I think when I was in my late 30s, or I suppose in my situation, I was single from the age of about 35. And I think at that stage, I never ever worried that I wasn't going to have children. I had this kind of blind optimism. I think that it would just happen to me. It's quite interesting when I see people now, or meet people that may be in their 30s, and they're kind of thinking, well, it might not happen. And that's actually much more realistic. Whereas I think I just thought, I'll meet someone and I'll have kids. And I just don't think for a minute I could allow myself to think that it wasn't going to happen. And so I also think I felt that because I was single, it was almost like I didn't feel I had the right to grieve, or the right to be sad, or the right to express a desire. Because I also remember thinking, well, if I said to someone, oh, I'm sad that maybe I'm not going to have children, I thought that people would be pitiful that I was single. And I really didn't want that, because I didn't actually feel sorry for myself. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want anyone to feel sorry for me. I just wanted to express that feeling. And I suppose when you're that age and you see it happening all around you, all your friends having kids, but it was definitely something I kind of squashed down. And then when I was about 42, I remember it's odd, can't really explain it, but it was a very, very physical, it was like the actual physical drive that the kind of, I suppose when people talk about something inside, a very physical feeling, it was like it just kind of flew away. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, oh, that's quite a relief, actually, that kind of physical thing that I feel every time I see a child or have a child, that's gone. So I'm okay. I must be okay then. And I really thought that was it. I thought I was over it and I could just move on. And then when I met the chap when I was 44 and being with him and being with his children and feeling all those maternal feelings, and because for me, having children was very much about having a family. I wanted a family. It was one of the reasons I didn't decide to have a child on my own. It was very much about having a unit. And so when all those sort of unexpressed desires, I guess, came to the surface, it felt like literally like a monster from the deep, because it kind of possessed me a bit like a monster. And because I didn't really understand what was going on, I just couldn't put any of it into words. And so it was a bit like something stirring from the bottom of the sea, and this idea that as it came up, the movement of it sort of muddies all the waters, because nothing was really the same again after that realization that it just wasn't going to happen, and the actual facing up to it rather than squashing it down, which I think is a very different thing. So that's why I called it Seamonster.
Wow. Okay. That makes absolute sense. And so
such a long explanation.
That's fine. I mean, because you never know who's listening and what they're getting out of that, and they're probably like, "Oh my gosh, I totally understand that."
This is one of the reasons why it's actually I found when I do gigs and I'm playing songs from the album, I do, depending on where I am and how big the event is, I'll maybe say a little bit about. There's one song which I kind of dedicated to Gateway Women, which is the online forum set up by Jodie Day, and I dedicate that song to them. And so I find what I do is I don't really say what's behind anything in great detail, and then I get to that song, and depending on where I am, I say, well, this album is about, and I just say it in one sentence, and I say dedicate this song to the women of that forum, and that's all I say about it. And sometimes I feel, I mean, I have some ideas about creating a performance piece around it's very much in the early stages. I haven't really decided how to do it, but around the songs of the album. And basically, I think I'd like to have a place where I can just, where I do express it and I talk about the songs, and because in gigs it feels, I don't know, it's sort of, you want to talk about it, but you also don't want to sort of shove it in people's faces, you know?
Right. Make them feel guilty.
Yeah, I don't know, like bring them down. I mean, it's silly, really, because you think, well, this is what the songs are about, you know? And but yeah, you want to give people a little bit of background, but it just hasn't really felt right to go into huge detail about it, really. Apart from I've played a couple of events which have been just a group of women in the same circumstance, and then I can sort of just talk a bit more about it like I am now, so that feels good.
Right. So it just depends on the type of event you're at, what you say and how much you say.
Yeah, because really the songs are songs that I think, apart from that one song, Sanctuary, there's one line in the song which is, it's about not holding, this desire to hold a child on your hips. That's the only time I refer to it kind of outright. And I think and hope that all the other songs could be about any number of things and any form of loss, or, and it isn't all about loss. They're about lots of different areas of dealing with it. And so, I like, I don't want them to be, I want them to be songs and any form of art, I think, are about people make up their own mind what they want it to be about, and I don't want to prescribe it to people, if you know what I mean.
Right. So you're somewhere in between prescribing and over prescribing, or is that one way of looking at it? Well, you don't want to over prescribe, because then when they listen to the music, they're like, well, I already know what this is about, so I don't even know how to feel anymore.
Yeah, kind of. And it's funny, I remember when I was making the album, I said I remember when I was sort of trying out the songs with various musicians, and I wanted them to know at the start, especially as actually when I started working on it, it was a couple of, probably 3 years ago, and I was kind of a little bit more sort of in the depths of it. But I would say to people, this album is about, me, the desire I had to have children that didn't happen, and that's what it's about. And I remember this one guy going, "What, all of it?" And I think he hadn't heard the songs then. And I said, don't worry, you wouldn't know. And I felt the need to be absolutely, it's not like I won't be crying in all of them.
Exactly.
I mean, I think that's what he thought. It's like, oh my God, you're just going to be wailing for 10 songs. It's going to be terrible.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, you've got to find that happy medium and try to figure out how to bring them in.
Yes.
Educate them but also allow them to have a nice evening of music.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely, yeah.
It'll happen, but I mean, it's just one of your 3 albums, right? You've got other albums.
I've written albums about other things, usually about broken relationships. But there you go. That's what most people's songs are about. So I don't really have to apologize about that one.
Right, every musician that we can even think of has written about a breakup, so hey.
Of course they have. It's all anyone's ever interested in. So.
Right.
Yeah.
That's funny. So, well, I guess you kind of told us, but how has the music helped you process childlessness? How do you want it to help those of us who are listening to the music process it?
For me, I started writing. I tend to, the songs that I perform of my own, they tend to be very autobiographical, just, what's going on in my life. Sometimes I write about other things, but it kind of seems to always come back to me. So I suppose it was inevitable that I would write about this, but I didn't really think, I started writing a few songs, and then I had the idea of, I wanted to create a whole album about it, in the sense that maybe albums used to be about the idea of a concept album, and then I wanted it to be, I didn't, at that point, I suppose, as time went on and I kind of moved through the journey, I wanted it to have hope, and I wanted it to kind of depict that there was a way through it. I didn't want it to be, I couldn't have done it all sort of when I was in the height of the grief or the depths of the grief, or because it wouldn't have kind of spanned the whole journey, and I probably wasn't really up to doing it then anyway. So I remember sort of thinking, well, what are all the aspects of this journey for me and for maybe the people that I've encountered? And so I wanted to have maybe a song about, there's a song about loneliness and about, being single, I guess. There's a song about seeing a way forward. There's a song about support. I thought these were all the different, maybe a song about just being kind of numb with it all. These are all the different aspects for me. And so in a way, primarily, it's for me to put the feelings into words, and the music is also part of the expression. And I wanted, I think I wanted it just to be part of a conversation, really. I think that I know that when I was kind of encountering all the feelings to begin with, that the fact that it was something that wasn't really discussed in public was a huge barrier to even admitting to myself what I was going through, and the shame as well. I mean, I know a lot of people have written and talked about it, and when I think back to how ashamed I felt, I mean, I remember I bought this book, I kind of did what I do with a lot of things that I feel difficult about. I just buy lots of books about it and put them on my shelf. And I remember hiding the book. I think, I can't remember. Yeah, I bought a couple of books about it, and I literally thought, when they were delivered, I thought, I cannot have these on the shelf if people come round to see them. And I've got books about, I mean, I've had quite a lot of episodes of depression in the past. I've got loads of books about depression and lots of different, and I probably was ashamed about that to begin with, and I'm not anymore because it was so long ago, and because so many people talk about it now.
Right.
So in some ways I felt that this could be the same, you know, then at least when someone was going through it, they didn't have to carry the shame as well as, because the experience is bad enough, isn't it? In itself, without it being sort of cloaked in silence, and what I've discovered through, I wouldn't necessarily say that definitely writing the songs is a form of catharsis, no doubt about that. I would say when I was recording the songs, I wouldn't say that really had that effect, because then you get kind of you start to feel a bit objective about it, and you're just stuck in the song really, and how best to record it and what instruments to use and that kind of thing. But with this album, I when I released the other albums, and I've self-released all of them, but I've never kind of approached, I had a sort of PR company, and I went a little bit more to town with getting reviews and things like that. And so that's really interesting because they brought up the subject in the kind of public domain. And that was very, I'm not too sure what the word is, but that felt good. It felt good to have it out there in print, and, and also in a way it allowed me to talk about it easier with other people, because it's almost like it had been kind of written about or something. I think it externalizes it and puts it out there in public, and it just becomes a topic that, takes away not the heaviness, but tries to reduce the taboo. I think that's what it's about. So for me, I think I wanted to, the songs I wanted to write, and then like any artist and musician, I guess you want people to hear your songs, and when they resonate with people, that's wonderful. And I know that for me, the more people that I've met that I've been able to talk about this experience, it's all hugely helpful. And therefore, if somebody was to hear, I have had a lot of amazing feedback from people saying that they felt that the words put some of their own feelings into words, or, that sort of thing. And I guess we have that, we do that with all forms of, when we're going through a tough time and we listen to songs, we listen to the words and it helps us, or we read poems, or whatever it is that you do to get some comfort. And also I wanted there is hope towards the end of the album, and I wanted to, because I know when I was going through it, there was people sort of on the Gateway forum that were further on in the journey, although I know it's not a linear thing, it goes backwards and forwards. But when I felt really terrible, and I believed, there was a while when I just thought, I just don't know that I'm ever going to feel okay about life again. And it was really, really helpful to me to find people that were further down the journey that were saying, actually, it gets better. It's not to say you feel amazing every day, or that you whatever, but it definitely, that will pass. You won't feel as bad as that forever. And that to me was very comforting. There was a bit of hope,
Definitely, because a few things that you said, like, for instance, the shame. Let me go back to that for a minute, because I actually had to write an episode on shame, because I felt, in my 30s is when I felt absolute shame, because everybody by that age group is having children. They're getting married, they're having kids, they're doing the quote-unquote normal things of life. I'm sitting there and I'm like, neither is happening for me, and I'm sure, I'm telling myself, they're all wondering what's wrong with me. How come I can't meet anybody? And how come I can't even have any kids? What's wrong with her? And
Mm,
oh my gosh, the level of shame
mm,
that we go through as childless, not by
mm,
choice women. And
mm,
for those of us who are also husbandless, not by
mm,
choice,
mm, mm, mm. I
it's a
know.
whole nother level of shame for sure. So I totally understand the shame aspect that you were talking about. And it does take time to get through it. And I don't feel the shame anymore. And that
No,
leads
I don't
to,
either.
yeah, it leads to
Yeah.
creating awareness, which is what you're doing with your album, with what I'm doing with
Mm.
my platform, my
Yes,
podcast,
yes,
with
yes.
what Jody does with Gateway Women, and all the other
Yes.
wonderful women out there that are creating awareness, because I believe that we're going to cover this entire planet with awareness so that this is no longer taboo, you know?
Yes,
It's high
yes.
time. It's 2018. We're in the
I
21st
know.
century. Come
I
on,
know.
people.
I know. It's like everything hasn't caught up. It's something I've thought about such a lot, and I've kind of tried to think, well, why? You know, where does that all come from? And I think well, there's a huge amount of so many different factors involved, I think. But I remember once standing in a queue in the bank, and probably when the fact that I noticed this probably meant I wasn't feeling very good at the time. But all around in the bank, the adverts were for, there was a grandparent with a grandchild, or a parent with a child, or that was all around the bank. And obviously these are, it's almost like the advertising and the messages that are out there are not the same as actually, because really that's not reality for a huge
Right.
amount of people.
A good
You
percentage,
know,
right?
yeah, and not just, whether it's like people that are single parents, and I mean, just like so many people are unrepresented
Right.
that but if you have all this stuff shoved in your face all the time, then you just think, well, there's something wrong with me. It's as simple as that.
Hmm.
But the reality of it is, whether it's because you decide not to have children, or you end up not being able to have them even if you wanted them, you don't fit those social norms. And
Right.
but so many people don't fit them. But it's like what we're forced to think is the right thing, through whether it's trying to sell us stuff,
Hmm.
is, of course you end up feeling like you're not,
Not
you know,
normal.
yeah, you haven't. And I do think as well that there's a lot of situations where, it's funny, it's something I've speaking to about with someone recently about that idea, and I know I felt it quite strongly, and lots of people do in our situation, that idea of not becoming an adult, of
Hmm.
what defines adulthood, and this fact that I used to, I remember when I was really feeling it, I was thinking, well, I don't have a family of my own, and I go back to visit my parents, and I'm the
Hmm.
only one of my siblings who's in that situation, and just all of that stuff, you just feel like a child.
Yeah, and they we had that conversation with when I interviewed Jody Day, how you can
Yes,
actually be treated like a child if you are single
yes,
and childless.
yes,
It was
yes,
amazing because I never even considered it until I realized I've dealt with that before, and other
yes,
childless, not by choice women are dealing with that, especially those who are single. We're
yes,
second class.
yeah,
We're not taken seriously because we
mm,
haven't, like you said, we haven't matured to
no.
having children, having a husband, having a family.
And yet, I mean, obviously these things are responsibilities, and it's a huge responsibility having a child. But you see, if you sort of turn it around, it doesn't mean that because we probably all know people that have children that are incredibly immature,
Exactly. Exactly.
and it doesn't make you mature. So not having one doesn't make you immature,
Right.
but
That's so
it's
true.
and I think some of that is, I suppose that's a, you can go very deep as to what the roots of that are, can't you? Of, whether we feel that we were meant to be here to have children and all
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. But the truth of the matter is things have changed, and people are choosing or not having children, and we have to kind of move with it, really. But I think it lags behind, doesn't
Oh
it?
yeah. It's like every time I think about this whole childless not by choice issue, it's like I think of a ship, like a cruise ship, how
Mm,
huge they are. and you've got one little rudder or little wheel in some little portion, even like an airplane. You ever look at an airplane, especially the jumbo jets, just look at any size airplane, and then you see the cockpit. If you're standing outside, it's just one little area of the plane, and how
Yes,
long
yes,
it
yes,
takes for
yes, yes.
the plane to turn.
Turn,
It's
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
amazing
yeah,
to me.
yeah,
But that's what I think this platform is like. It's just
yeah.
taking forever to turn. But hey, it eventually does turn. And
Mm,
I believe it will for us as well. And then the other thing that I was thinking about was you were talking about the fact that there are a lot more people now that are choosing not to
mm,
have children.
mm, mm,
And
mm,
we both sets of us are treated the same way by society,
mm,
but we have
mm,
different feelings on the way we're being treated.
yes, yes, yes,
One of us
yes,
is in pain
yes,
emotionally, mentally, and the other one is like, "Huh, whatever."
yes, yes. But also still potentially struggling with how they might be treated for that decision,
Right,
which is which is nothing to do with anybody else, is
right.
it?
It's really nobody else's business, but
No,
society
absolutely
makes it their
nobody.
business. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Mm. And people
So,
make judgments, I guess, don't they? People
right.
make
They
because
prejudge.
because they're not fitting you know,
Right.
what they think should be is the inevitable way that things should be.
Society's norms.
Mm, mm.
So, anyway, moving on here because I've taken up so much of your time so far
It's
today.
okay.
um, I wanted to go back in time a little bit. I wanted to
Yes.
ask you, I know you told me, but let's tell the audience how long you were practicing, a general practitioner. And you mentioned in our pre-interview that you never wanted to be a doctor, but is there any aspect of it that you miss? So a two-part question.
Yeah. I played the piano from an early age. I played classical piano. I learned to play classical piano, but I wouldn't say that I wrote songs when I was younger because I didn't really have any kind of words. I didn't think I had any experience I could put into words.
Hmm.
But I used to do my practice, but most of the time I would just be sort of messing around playing the piano, and I loved listening to songs and working out the chords. And I just had this I've read this about songwriters that, or maybe any artistic endeavor, that I kind of knew when I was about 11 or 12 that I wanted to be a songwriter. It was quite it was a notion I had, a strong notion. And I can remember, don't know if you know the Eurovision Song Contest that happens. And anyway, that was the only sort of songwriting competition I'd heard of. And I can remember my ambition was to write a song that would win Eurovision. And then as I got older, I was, reasonably good at school, and I had a very, or have, but he's not really like that anymore, quite a sort of, I'm struggling to find the right word, dictatorial father, let's put it like that, who, had very strong beliefs about thinking that music wasn't a valid thing to do, really. There was no kind of value given to creative things like that in my family. And he was an engineer initially, and then he became a farmer. We moved up to Scotland and he became a farmer. But so I can remember saying I wanted to do that, and he was just very dismissive and said, well, you'll never get a job. It was probably right. But anyway, and said, just keep it as a hobby and, try and get into medicine or something like that. So that's what I did. And also when I left school, there wasn't really any, I look at the courses now and think there's millions of music courses I would have liked to have done. But when I was leaving school, really, there was only classical piano. And I knew really strongly I didn't want to do classical piano. I didn't want to play other people's music, So I kind of trundled along being a doctor, and eventually, when I was in my late 30s, I left and didn't even know that I was leaving to go and study music. I'd sort of buried much. I think it's something I'm very good at, burying things. So I'd buried my desire to be a doctor, to be a musician, very deep, I think. And I kind of had this feeling that if it wasn't going to be my life, I didn't want to do it at all. So actually, when I eventually went off to study music in my late 30s, I hadn't played the piano for years. I mean, I'd only just got back into playing it. So anyway, I went off and studied music and songwriting, and then I went back to being a doctor and worked part-time in a job for another 7 years. And that was a really nice GP job because it was a job where I actually had time to deal with people's problems, which was quite rare these days here anyway in general practice. But so that was really good. So the decision to leave that was difficult because actually, as far as GP jobs go, I recognised that it was a really nice one. Had a really good team of staff and everything. And so it's not really that I could even say that I wouldn't even say that I dislike being a doctor, really, because I love people, and that's kind of the main bit of the job, and especially when you're a general practitioner. It's just that I wanted to be a songwriter more. That's kind of how it was for me. And at that time when I was working part-time, I thought, well, this should be enough. I've got, I'm earning financially, and then I can do the music in my spare time. But I reached this point. I actually had I had a sort of infection and a really bad fever, and I was kind of a bit delirious, and my life sort of flashed before me. And I thought, it really, really did. And I thought, what am I doing? I have to leave. I'm just kind of thinking this is okay because everyone tells me you're really lucky. You've got this job and you can support yourself and you still have time to do your music, but it's not enough for me. I want to do it more. I don't want to just. So anyway, I left. So I left a year ago, and I do miss. I don't miss the job. I miss the people I worked with, and I miss the patients that I had, and I miss the contact of that in that manner. And I think I miss the structure a wee bit about the kind of idea of doing a good day's work, especially a good day's work that's quite, you just roll into work and you just do it and you leave. You don't have to, yeah. You do think, but you don't have to think about yourself. You're thinking about other people. What I'm trying to do now is I'm giving myself time to sort of build various things up, but a lot of what I'm having to do is trying to sell myself, trying to sell my music. Like most people, I don't find that very easy. Right. And I've got a few sort of little projects on the go, but it's all it's very, very different to having a very structured job. And also, I suppose not only did I have a structured job, but I had a very structured training, especially the way that general practice, it's a bit different now when you study to be a doctor. It's a little bit more kind of self sort of regulated, and I think you're encouraged to think more. But when I went to university, you were just fed loads of facts, basically, and you just had to learn them.
You had to weed through them.
Yeah, you just had to learn them and use them. And when you do something creative, it's different in just every possible way. And you also have to find your own work, which is the same for a lot of different jobs, but it's absolutely not the same for being a doctor. Because certainly in Britain, there's work, you get a job, you do it. It's kind of that simple. I'm not saying it's an easy job, but you know what I mean in terms of finding.
You went to school, you learned what to do, and
then you just do it.
Yeah.
So it's got other things that are difficult about it, but finding work and creating work and is not one of them. And also I don't think yourself. One of the things I'm realizing that I'm finding particularly difficult is trying to separate your idea of self-worth of your own self and your art and public appreciation, and trying to sort of make sure there's a separation so that you're not so emotionally tied to validation from whatever might be happening with your work, because that's a bit of a recipe for disaster, So that's quite different because, again, I think as a doctor you feel, although you might not feel you're doing great stuff, I think you do generally feel valued, because people value you, and it's kind of there's a lot of, I'm sort of in quite a transition period, I think.
It takes a minute. I mean, I've been away from the 9 to 5 fully. I've had little gigs here and there, but
Mm-hmm.
fully away from 9 to 5 since 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I like structure. I
Mm,
mean, we like to think that, it sounds wonderful when we go to the 9 to 5 job and
to not have
we're
it, yes.
right, then you don't have it. It's like, uh-oh, what do I do now?
Yeah, of
So you've
course.
really got to structure your day on your own, or you
Yeah,
end up spending days where nothing gets done.
yeah,
Where
yeah,
if you
yeah,
went to
yeah,
work, at least they tell you when to go to lunch, when to go to break,
yeah,
how many
yeah,
people you have to cover today. And of course, your job
yeah,
is way higher than what I did, but there was still structure. And now there
yeah.
is no
You
structure, and
no.
you either sink or swim now.
Mm, mm.
And
And do
like you
you
said,
feel it took you? Can you, like, looking back over that period of time? Can you recognize the stages of you adapting to a different
mm,
way
what's
of
this, 2018? So it's been what, 4 years now?
mm, mm.
I can tell you that I hope I never have to go back to it.
Well, that's good.
And I mean, the regular income, I miss the regular income,
Sure.
but I really do hope I never have to go back to 9 to 5 again.
Mm, mm, mm,
But the structure aspect of it, yes, I miss
mm,
the getting up in the morning and going
mm.
out, but I also like getting up in the morning and not having to rush out into rush
Yeah,
hour traffic
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
scheduling myself because I'm a big time daytimer person. I have a
Mm,
daytimer. My friends laugh at me because their schedule is on their smart device. Well,
mm, mm.
I've got a written daytimer, and if it's not written, it doesn't get done. I pen
Yes,
things
yes,
forward, I cross things out when they're done, and
yes, yes,
I'm structured that way.
yes,
So I don't
yes.
like to waste time. So
No, you
you
create
kind of
your own.
you create your time, you create your
You
schedule,
create your structure. Yeah.
and if people call you, if they're not on I just won't take the call. I'm so sorry, I'm
Mm,
not taking the phone call
mm,
because
mm.
I get distracted and then I end up
Yes.
doing nothing, and then
Mm,
I'm only hurting me when nothing gets done.
mm, mm, mm. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I totally understand, where you are a year in, but on the one hand, it's gotten easier. On the other, I think structure will help in the
Yes,
long
yes,
term.
and I think you're right. I think we crave, we do as much as we like to think we don't. I think we all need a level of it, don't we?
Right, right.
A level of that structure and a sense of, I suppose, a sense of purpose, or a sense that you're, even with tiny little goals, what you're doing is going towards something. Or
Towards a bigger picture.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. And for me, I kind of thought to myself, when I was leaving, I suppose I've kind of left before and then went back and then left, this sort of thing. But this time I thought, okay, I could have left what I was doing and carried on doing. It's very easy to get locum work here where you just stand in for doctors, and that way it can be as flexible as you like. And I've done a lot of that in the past, and it's okay for the short term, but it's not very satisfying. And the thing about doing that as a GP is you still have to keep, you have to have an annual appraisal where you have to do your continuing professional development, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And so I kind of thought, well, I could keep doing some locums because the idea of like leaving permanently seems really difficult. But actually, then my job was already part time, so I might as well have stayed where I was. What I thought was, if I give myself a couple of years, I've got some savings, still got some ways of earning some money, then I can see it's like giving myself the time to develop.
Right.
And I realize that it's quite hard to do that because there's a bit of me that just says, but I have to have job, I have to have
Right.
paid work, I have to
Right.
have, what have I achieved? What have I achieved in this year? For example, I went to a party last night, some people I haven't seen for quite a while, and I'm already saying, well, it's a year since I left. What have I achieved in that time? And the only person who's actually judging
Is yourself.
me is me. Yeah,
Yes.
no, absolutely nobody else is judging me. It's just me, and it's very, very hard to stop doing it. But I'm really trying.
Yeah, it is. It is hard, and even if they are judging you, they're not telling you because they're probably wishing they could do the same thing
Yeah,
because you've taken a
probably.
risk on yourself. You've taken a chance, and many
Yeah,
people are not willing to do that.
no, for lots of
And Yeah.
reasons.
If
And
you're
yeah.
called to, if you're feeling tugged away and called away to do something, it's hard. I
Mm,
said no for quite some time because I wanted the regular income and the job to go
mm,
to and some level
mm,
of, belonging and all of that. But
mm,
it keeps
mm,
tugging at you. It's like, oh
mm,
my gosh,
mm.
okay.
Yes, 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 yes. I was saying to someone that because I had the last job I did for the last 7 years, I worked a week. I worked kind of 1 week and then I had 2 weeks off, which what I mean, it was amazing. It's amazing to be able to survive on that, income wise and all the rest of it. And but what I felt was like in the 2 weeks I felt like a dog on a chain. That in the 2 weeks that I wasn't working there, I would start to kind of move away but then like in one of those extendable leads,
Hmm.
and then at the end of the 2 weeks when I was back to work, it would just yank me back into kind of doctorness
Right.
and all that kind of, I don't know, my sort of creative, all the other thing that I actually always wanted to do would be like right back in the box,
Mm.
and it just wasn't, and so that's that. I just had to do it really. But yeah, kind of I suppose living with it and living through it has got its own challenges really.
Yeah.
But I find there's a lot of stuff that you can read. I mean, the internet's amazing for all the stuff that you can find that helps you read stuff that
Hmm.
keeps you going. When you feel different things, and
A
so
lot
it's
of
good.
blogs out there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. So, as we wrap things up here, what does your family think about your new life's calling?
Well, I think that the shock of it all was probably lived through quite a while ago when I first left my job when I was like 37 or something, and I saw this course advertised in London, and I said I was going to go down to the open day, and my dad, we had a conversation like I was still 17 basically. Yeah, it was pretty bad. And my mum was kind of worried for me
Yeah.
and a bit very protective, not in the same way as dad. It was more like, oh, I'm worried about you going to London. And so I think dad's eventually just given up. So he doesn't really say anything.
Mm.
And my mum is like my sort of biggest fan, really. And everyone else, it's less of a, because I've been I suppose I've been working towards it gradually. So it's not really, me leaving last year was much less of a big deal than me leaving the first time
Mm.
when I was 30, whatever, and went off to study that course. That was, leaving, going down to London, doing the course, being like the oldest student on the course, and all of that was really hard. Whereas this, I mean, in a way, kind of living through this is harder because you're having to sort of. I said now I'm doing it, but the actual leaving the work wasn't a big deal this time. Whereas the first time felt, I really did think, what the heck am I doing?
Well, so everybody's trying to just probably just watching and waiting and hoping the best for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah, so
exactly.
that's good. When is your next gig? I think you mentioned earlier that you have something this month in October. You can tell us all about it.
Yeah, I'm going to. I used to live on an island in the kind of northwest of Scotland called the Isle of Lewis,
Mm.
which is fairly remote, and probably even a huge amount of Scots people have never been there. I spent a year there as part of my sort of general practice training, and so I'm going there to do a gig in a little school. There's a kind of cafe which used to be an old school, and the woman puts kind of music on every now and then. So that's going to be really small. I quite like doing really small gigs. It's only going to be sort of, I think, 25, 30 people, something like that. So I'm doing that at the end of the month, and that'll be on my own, just because it's a bit further away. And then in October, I've got a gig again. These gigs that I'm doing at the moment are quite sort of remote. So there's a place, it's the kind of most westerly point of Scotland it's called Ardnamurch. And again, it's somewhere that most Scottish people
Mm.
haven't even been. And there's my sister lives up there, and there's a really nice art gallery, and I'm going to do a gig in that. And the musicians that I play with at the moment, a friend on cello and a friend on guitar and singing. They kind of do harmonies and stuff. They're going to play with me, and also a woman who works in the gallery who I've met who does percussion. So that'll be nice.
Okay, that sounds very nice. Is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap up this episode?
I don't think so. As you probably realised, I don't have a problem speaking, so I should probably stop there. Otherwise, I just keep going.
Those are the best interviews, trust me.
Yeah, it's just you just press a button with me and I'm off. You know.
I mean, imagine the people that you have to sit there and drag information out of. That would not be cool.
No, that would be hard work. Yeah, that doesn't happen with me.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on and telling us about your albums, and just now we have everybody out there listening. We have an album that we can pretty much claim as ours in our community, as a Childless Not by Choice community.
Do you know, sorry, this is the last thing I'll say, Civilla, I promise, but I got a message, or I can't remember who it was that told me this, but somebody who bought it said that and I thought this was amazing. I'd never thought about this as a possibility. Buying the album, it meant that they could discuss it with someone, the subject, through talking about the album, and it made it easier for them to bring it up with them because it was a kind of external objective thing of this album. And I just thought, wow, that's amazing.
Awesome. Of course. Because, I mean, I don't know if the listeners out there who have children who don't fit our demographic realize this, but a lot of Childless Not by Choice people find it very difficult to discuss the childlessness.
Yeah.
And they if they can find a way to open up the conversation, they will. And hey, this album is doing that for some people, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was really I was quite amazed to hear that and really pleased. Yeah. I thought, that's brilliant.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Chiara, thank you so much for your time today.
Interest.
If you ever need to reach out to me, feel free to email me at Civilla@CivillaMorgan.com, or just visit me at Twitter, Instagram. Instagram is @JoyAndRelevance. Twitter is @Civilla1. And of course, I'm on Pinterest. I'm on LinkedIn. So just, look me up, give me a shout, and let me know if you have any questions. Give me 24 to 48 hours to respond. And once again, I really appreciate your taking the time to tune in. And remember, check out the CivillaMorgan.com website and let me know if you'd like me to come speak to your group on whether it's podcasting, why you should podcast or why not, and also joy versus relevance. Okay? Thanks a lot for listening, and until next time, have a great one. Bye.